You're here for the deep dive because you want to get up to speed and fast. Maybe it's for a meeting, maybe just pure curiosity. Today, we're diving into something familiar: boredom in the classroom. And its opposite, or maybe not, interest. You sent us some really cool research on this.
Yeah, we're looking at a study hot off the presses, February 2025. It's called Is Boredom the Opposite of Interest? An open access piece in the Educational Psychology Review. So the big question is, is boredom just, well, a lack of interest, or is it its own thing? And how do these two interact over time for students? There are some surprises here.
Right. The common sense idea is just, interest off, boredom on. Simple.
Like a light switch, yeah.
But the study kind of says, hang on, maybe boredom's more than just the switch being off. It's its own feeling.
Exactly. That's what researchers are starting to recognize. And this study, it's longitudinal, which is great. It tracked kids, over 1,400 German secondary students.
Oh, wow. For how long?
4 years, from 5th grade all the way to 8th grade. And they looked specifically at math and German classes using self-report questionnaires at 4 different times.
Okay, 4 years, 2 subjects. That's a lot of data. So how did they figure out if boredom and interest are actually separate things from those questionnaires?
Well, they used some pretty smart stats, confirmatory factor analysis.
Right. What does that actually mean, though?
Okay, think of it like sorting Lego bricks. If boredom and interest were just like two sides of one coin, maybe different shades of blue, all the answers would clump together in one big blue pile.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're distinct, like, say, blue bricks and red bricks, then the answers about feeling bored would group together, and the answers about interest would form their own separate group.
Oh, okay. Different piles of bricks.
Exactly. And the study found the data fit much better with a two-pile model. Boredom and interest were separate, though kind of related, near each other.
So empirical evidence. Not just a feeling, but the data showed they're distinct.
Precisely. And there's more. They looked at stability over time using something called latent cross-lagged models. Fancy name, but basically asks, if you feel bored now, how likely are you to feel bored later?
And what did they find?
Well, the paths for boredom were pretty low. Feeling bored at one point didn't strongly predict feeling bored years later. It seemed changeable.
Okay.
But interest, that showed high stability, high paths. If you were interested early on, you were quite likely to still be interested later.
Huh. That makes a kind of intuitive sense, doesn't it? Boredom feels more temporary, maybe tied to a specific lesson, while interest can feel deeper, more lasting.
Right. So these different stability patterns, they're another strong clue that we're dealing with two separate constructs.
Okay, let's nail down the definitions then. What exactly did they mean by academic boredom? It sounds unpleasant.
They define it as an affective state composed of unpleasant feelings, lack of stimulation, and low physiological arousal. So yeah, it feels bad.
Unpleasant feelings, lack of stimulation, low arousal, like feeling drained and restless at the same time?
Kind of. Plus that feeling of time dragging, wanting to escape. It's actively aversive, not just meh. And importantly, it's usually domain specific. You might be bored, stiff in math, but totally engaged in German.
Right, okay, so not just a lack of interest, but this active negative state. Got it. What about academic interest then?
They drew on the dictionary definition, first wanting to pay attention, wanting to discover more.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and academically, they frame it as the psychological state of engaging or the predisposition to re-engage with certain subjects or ideas. It has like 2 parts.
Okay.
An affective part, that positive feeling, enjoyment, and a cognitive part, actually thinking about it, wanting to learn more, being mentally involved.
So positive feelings plus active mental engagement.
Exactly. And just like boredom, it tends to be domain-specific too. You might love physics problems, but find history dates, well, boring.
Okay, so we've got these distinct definitions. Boredom, unpleasant, pushes you away. Interest, positive, pulls you in. Let's revisit why they're not just opposites again. What's the core difference?
It really comes down to that negative feeling with boredom. The unpleasantness, it has a negative valence, as psychologists say.
Right, it feels bad.
Which leads to avoidance motivation. You want out.
Right.
Lack of interest doesn't have that negative kick. It's more effectively neutral. You just don't feel pulled towards it. No approach motivation.
Like walking past a shop you don't need anything from versus wanting to get away from a really loud noise.
Good analogy. And the study also mentions boredom is shaped by this mix of the person, the subject, the environment, while interest is maybe more strongly tied to the specific object or topic itself.
Okay, that distinction feels much clearer now. So the study tracked this over time. Let's talk about the interplay. What did they find about interest influencing boredom? The more expected stuff first, maybe.
Yeah, the findings here lined up pretty well with what you'd guess and with other theories. Higher levels of interest early on were linked to lower levels of boredom later, both in math and German.
Makes sense. If you value something, find it engaging. You're less likely to be bored by it.
Exactly. Interest acts almost like a buffer or a protective factor against feeling bored down the line. Previous research pointed that way too.
Okay, no big surprises there. But you mentioned a twist, the other direction. Boredom influencing interest. This is where it gets weird.
This is the really fascinating part, yeah. Totally counterintuitive. They found that students who reported higher boredom relative to their peers actually showed an increase in their interest later on.
Wait, what? Higher boredom led to more interest? How?
I know, right? It kicked in from the second measurement point onwards in both subjects. It's a solid finding in their data, but the why is still a bit speculative.
Okay, let's hear the speculations. This is intriguing.
So one idea is under challenge. Picture a bright kid who's just coasting, finds it all too easy, they get bored, right?
Lack of stimulation.
But maybe as they keep succeeding easily, they start to see the subject as something they're really good at, a place they can shine. And that feeling of competence, that mastery, could actually spark more interest. Hey, I rock at this.
So the boredom from being under-challenged could ironically lead to interest via perceived success. That's complex.
It is. Another possibility relates to the opposite problem, over-challenge.
So struggling and feeling overwhelmed leads to boredom.
Yeah, maybe as a coping mechanism, like tuning out because it's too stressful or confusing. But then that uncomfortable feeling might motivate them to change something.
Like asking for help or trying a different study method.
Exactly. They increase their engagement to overcome the struggle, maybe start to understand it better, get some positive results, and boom. That initial frustration and boredom could actually morph into interest.
Wow. Okay, so boredom as a catalyst for change, whether you're under or over challenged. What was the third idea?
The third one is really interesting. They call it a coping mechanism, or like cognitive reappraisal. Think about it. School subjects are often compulsory. You can't just walk out if you're bored.
True. You're stuck there.
So maybe, consciously or unconsciously, to make the situation less unpleasant, students start actively looking for something, anything interesting about the subject. They reappraise it.
Like trying to find the silver lining in a boring cloud.
Kind of. They might latch on to one small interesting detail or reframe the subject's relevance to them.
Oh.
And that mental effort to cope could, perhaps accidentally, foster genuine interest over time.
A survival tactic that ends up actually working to build interest? That's wild. It completely flips the script on just thinking boredom is always bad for learning.
It really does challenge that simple inverse relationship, doesn't it? It suggests things are way more dynamic.
Definitely. Now, you mentioned domain specificity earlier. Bored in math doesn't mean bored in German. Did the results confirm that strongly?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The correlations within subjects like math boredom with math interest were much stronger than any correlations between subjects like math boredom and German interest. It really supports that subject-specific idea for both feelings.
And the stability thing we touched on. Interest being sticky, boredom being more changeable.
Yes, that contrast came through clearly too. Interest showed high stability across the 4 years, relatively consistent. Boredom showed lower stability, and it even seemed to decrease in stability over time.
Which again points to them being different kinds of experiences.
Exactly. It's another piece of the puzzle showing they aren't just mirror images of each other.
Okay, this is fascinating stuff. But like all research, it's not the final word, right? Were there limitations the researchers pointed out? Things we should keep in mind?
For sure, and it's good they acknowledge them. First, the sample was only students from the highest academic track in Germany's school system.
So maybe it works differently for kids in other tracks or other countries even.
Potentially, yeah. We need to see if these findings hold up in more diverse groups. Replication is key.
Makes sense. What else?
Well, it's all based on self-reports, students filling out questionnaires about their feelings.
Which is valuable, but subjective.
Right. You always wondered about biases, or if kids are interpreting questions the same way. Future research could be richer if it included, say, classroom observations, teacher ratings, maybe even physiological stuff like heart rate variability to measure engagement.
Get a more multifaceted picture.
Exactly. And lastly, this study really zoomed in on boredom and interest. But loads of other things matter for learning, right? Like self-confidence, achievement, Why someone is bored, is it too easy, too hard, just irrelevant? Exploring how those factors weave into this boredom interest dynamic would be really insightful.
Okay, important context. It definitely sounds like this study cracked open a door to more questions, but let's bring it back home. For someone listening, maybe a teacher, a parent, or just reflecting on their own school days, what are the practical takeaways? Why should they care about this?
I think there are a few key things. For anyone involved in education, it's a big reminder. Boredom isn't just laziness or a simple lack of interest. It's a signal.
A signal that something's potentially off.
Yeah, maybe the challenge level isn't right, or the student isn't seeing the value. It prompts us to dig a bit deeper than just saying, pay attention.
And knowing that interest can reduce boredom, that suggests strategies, right?
Definitely. Things like utility value interventions, showing students how the subject connects to their lives, their goals, the real world. They can boost interest and, as this study suggests, indirectly fight boredom. Make it relevant.
Connecting the dots for them.
Precisely. But then there's that surprising twist.
That boredom might sometimes precede interest.
Right. And that's a huge practical point. Don't automatically see boredom as the end of the road for engagement. It might, in some contexts, actually be a messy part of the process of becoming more interested. It cautions against writing off a bored student too quickly.
So it's a much more nuanced dance between these two feelings than we thought. Not just interest good, boredom bad.
Absolutely. Boredom could be a flag, maybe even a weird kind of stepping stone sometimes.
Yeah.
It pushes us to think more flexibly about student engagement.
This has been genuinely fascinating. Really changed how you might think about those classroom dynamics.
Doesn't it?
So let's wrap this up for our listeners. Key takeaway. Boredom and interest, they're linked, but distinct. Boredom isn't just interest turned off, it's its own unpleasant thing.
And while interest helps keep boredom away, the really mind-bending part is that sometimes, maybe, feeling bored could actually lead to more interest later. Perhaps because you find a way to cope, or the challenge level shifts.
Understanding that complex back and forth gives us some pretty valuable clues about learning and motivation.
Yeah, it shows that learning isn't always smooth sailing, and maybe those moments of boredom have more going on beneath the surface than we realize. Potential for growth, even.
So here's something to mull over. Think about a time you were super bored with something. School, work, whatever. Did that boredom ever somehow shift into interest later on? What was going on there? Was it getting easier? Harder? Did you find some weird angle that suddenly clicked? Worth pondering your own experience through this lens.
Definitely food for thought. This deep dive opens up a lot about the subtleties of how we engage or disengage with learning.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.